Hello, I'm Lucy from Cruickshanks and I'm here today to talk about Salt Lick by Lulu Allison, one of the books longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2022. If you're new to our channel, lovely to meet you. Please do stick around, hit subscribe and say hello. We're always up for a chat. So, Salt Lick. This was the book out of all the books on the long list that I was most excited to read, that spoke to me the most from the blurb on the back. And I also really love the fact that this book is published by Unbound. So it's crowdfunded. This has been published because the crowd wanted it to do so. But also, it means a crowdfunded book got onto a prize list, and I think that is a very cool thing and kind of restores my faith in book prizes. I was going to say humanity, maybe not quite that far, but book prizes a little bit, because sometimes you think, oh, are they fair? Has a big publisher bought their way onto this? Crowdfunding, big fan of the fact that Salt Lick got onto the prize. But did I love it? That's the question. So this is a dystopian novel set in Britain. It is dual viewpoint and dual timeline. We have Jessie in the countryside and we have Isolde in the city many years into the future. Jessie's family are weighing up whether or not they need to leave the countryside because of all this dystopian stuff that's going on. And in the future, Isolde's narrative follows her visiting the murderer of her mother in prison and the story that unravels from there. I'm speaking carefully because I don't want to spoil the plot, so I'm going to stop there with the plotty stuff, but that's basically what happens. And as we go forward, these two narratives eventually, inevitably, do collide. The setting is a dystopian one. We've got a lot of dystopia going on in here as well. We have got pandemic, climate change, the unraveling of civil society. I mean, those three things are conceivably, very well intertwined, but also pretty bloody unlucky to get the whole lot at the same time. So it is a very dystopian setting, but also at the same time, it's a super believable setting. It's actually one of the real strengths of the book, I thought, because it feels like, although it's very extreme, at the same time, it's only just beyond where we are. It feels so like if we're not careful, this really truly could be the Britain of not that far down the line. It's like we're at the precipice of this dystopia. And the author has very clearly chosen those themes because of the contemporary political situation that we're in, and then pushed them to the extreme. And that is why I think the setting, the dystopian setting, works so well in this book. Obviously, we're looking at the countryside and we're looking at the city. The countryside part of this novel, loved it. That really, really worked for me. So I grew up, in British terms, about as rural as you're going to get on the British Isles. We're quite a crowded island, but as things go, I was a rural child. And Scott as well. We both grew up in Cornwall, in little villages, a few miles apart. And this book totally nailed what growing up in the countryside is like. So Jessie's experience in lots of ways, I saw it and it felt very nostalgic in a way, because it's kind of a love letter to a childhood spent in the countryside in lots of ways, at the beginning at least. That level of freedom that I don't think you necessarily get growing up in the cities like you did or you do in the countryside. I mean, God, we had so much freedom. But at the same time, it's set against this backdrop of real poverty and real decline in the countryside. And this feeling that actually you're always second best to the cities, that you don't matter. There is this massive disconnect being down in Cornwall from sort of feeling like what goes on matters to you. So that bit of the setting I loved and thought was bang on. She nailed it. The city bit didn't speak to me quite so much. You know, it's still a good setting, but it didn't, you know, it didn't have like the excitement and the pizzazz and the recognisableness to me. But, you know, I'm not a city girl, so, you know, you can't have it all. The characters as well are kind of linked to that. So I did enjoy Jessie's strand much more than Isolde's one. Probably because of that countryside setting. And I just found him more exciting and more engaging, and sort of the strand, I guess, with a little bit more momentum to it, particularly as the book progressed. He was the one, you know, that I was almost waiting to get back to a little bit, you know, and that's the trouble, isn't it, I guess, with dual viewpoints. You know, if you nail them both, wonderful, but actually there's always going to be a little bit of an imbalance, which is just down to personal preference, isn't it, really? And I think one thing that perhaps didn't help that is the style in which it's written and the viewpoints and the voices, I personally found were pretty identical between the two viewpoints. So, you know, there wasn't a huge leap for me in lots of ways. I wanted sort of like a bit more distinction between the voices and where I was and when I was and who I was listening to speak. But actually that rolls into the point about style, because actually listening to me speak, listening to who was speaking, it's a totally omnipotent narrator. You're not actually listening to the voices of the characters. There's this really lofty viewpoint. It's almost biblical kind of in tone. Do you know what? It's like, it's slow and it's really descriptive, and it's really indulgent in a way, but also none of the words are wasted. You know that a conscious choice has been made about every paragraph, every sentence, every word, like zoning in on what I'm going to talk about, what is my choice of language. And that really comes across. And the prose is beautiful. It's really beautiful. But again, it comes a little bit, as so often is the case, at the expense of sort of the pace and the plot. It does get slowed down by this, lofty viewpoint that's reflected in like really detailed literary prose. And I did, so many times I was like, this is a book, not a women's prize book. It kind of did feel more... a bit more niche, I guess, which the Booker often is, but maybe stylistically a little bit more bookery than historically the Women's Prize has been. The other bit about the style, which we cannot possibly not talk about, is the feral cows. So one reason that I was really excited to read this book was because of the feral cows. I'd heard that there was this Greek chorus running through the book, narrated by feral cows, and there's all these little poems interspersing the text in the middle of chapters, breaking it all up, where the cows write a poem basically. And I was so excited for that. I was like, what is this going to be like? How is this going to work? Not quite work for me, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Lulu. To start with, I was like, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing here. I see where this is going. But then it just slowed the pace down too much, and it broke the voice up too much, and it took me out the moment of the story too much. And then I just stopped reading them, because you don't need to read them. You can just skim over them. You can just completely miss them out, and the story and the book and the characters and nothing suffers. And that kind of made it for me a little bit indulgent, because I was like, what is this adding? Possibly not enough for me to warrant being in there. And that was a bit of a shame. So the themes of the book. So obviously we're looking at the decline of the countryside and the climate change, how that plays into that. And, the fall of civil society, I guess, as sort of like this right-wing nationalism comes up. So loads and loads of really contemporary political themes are in there, and they're great and they're done really well. And then also you've got sort of like the personal themes, which are more about like self-autonomy and control, and I guess how far you have to go in thinking about others before you can just think about yourself, and sort of looking at, control, I think, like who controls you, how you can control yourself and things like that, which I thought also were done pretty well. Although, you know, I kind of preferred the big themes to like those little personal ones a little bit more for me. And overall, you know, I think it's a good read. I think it is a good read. I probably wanted it to be a little bit shorter. And the ending wasn't quite entirely sure. I could have read quite happily, I think, a whole book of Jessie. And yeah, what am I saying? It's a good read. It is a good read and I enjoyed it. And I can totally see why it's made the list because it is an achievement, particularly the prose. I did really like the prose, just wanted to squish it all down a little bit and tighten it up and condense it and make it slightly smaller, slightly crisper. And then I think it probably would have been more for me. In terms of what it's like, I came up with these two a little bit. I've got Ionopolis by Glenn James Brown and Perfidious Albion by Sam Byers, which were both actually on the Orwell Prize for political fiction on that list 3 years ago. Doesn't say on the jacket. Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4, who knows. But they're both got similar themes, I guess, about like the decline of British society in different ways. And I say British society, I keep saying British society because that's where all 3 of these books are set. But actually, I think, you know, Western societies in general are all, you know, would all take something from all of these novels, actually. The themes are relevant across the board. But I think, you know, this one's quite a serious one and this one's got a little bit more black humour in it. This one, humourless. Not in a bad way, just not a funny book. But yeah, the overall themes, I think, are kind of in that ballpark. I don't know how many people have read this book. I think compared to the others on the long list, not so many. I haven't seen so much of it about. Am I just looking in the wrong places? If you've read it, I'd really like to know your thoughts. I'm not sure whether I'm going to get this video out before the shortlist is announced. I don't think I am. Am I talking to you from beyond the grave? Did this make the shortlist? Did it make the shortlist? It feels pointless now to say what do you think is going to make the shortlist. Did the books that made the shortlist make you happy? God, this is getting a bit meta. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, that might be it because now the shortlist is out, I might go read some other things as well. And I might go back and read a couple of the others. But anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts on the Women's Prize, how it's going, what you're reading. Hope you're having a lovely week and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.